Hello and welcome back to the Spike podcast. I'm Fraser Myers, and with me as ever we have Spike's editor Tom Slater.
Hello.
And we're delighted to be joined by returning guest, good friend of the show, Talks Julia Hartley-Brewer.
Avid Spiked podcast listener, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Yes, thank you.
Thanks again for coming back on. We've got loads to talk about today. We're going to be discussing life under a Labour government, the hypocrisy of, I know, terrifying. Watch this space. The hypocrisy of the Green Party and David Tennant's rant about Kemi Badenoch. Now, it seems pretty certain, I don't think I'm going out on too much of a limb here to say that Keir Starmer will be the UK's next Prime Minister, certainly with what all polls are suggesting. He's probably already, measuring the curtains in Downing Street right now. There's been a lot of discussion around the election about how little difference there is between Labour and the Tories, quite understandably, given that basically have the same economic policy and a lot of the same policy approaches to a lot of issues. But there are some subtle differences, and they are, those are worth drawing out. And in many ways, where they do differ, Labour are worse, wouldn't you say, Tom?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that has been slightly buried in the discussion until this week, interestingly, because one area where there is a clear difference is on questions of the culture war, more broadly. Now, there are certain Tories who have been quite half-hearted culture warriors, shall we say, but in terms of policy, there is a clear difference. And we saw that burst out into the open on the question of gender and sex-based rights again this week, where you had Keir Starmer continuing to flip-flop on this particular issue, pretending that he'd come to a more gender critical perspective, but really when it comes down to the detail, it doesn't seem there's going to be a hell of a lot of difference. They do want to
stop dehumanising trans people.
Sorry,
I think that's what you're supposed to say at this point.
No, you are, just as a disclaimer. But trans rights are human rights, etc. Let's crack on. But it is, so that's one thing that came out, obviously, with in terms of liberalising or humanising the process of gender recognition. And also the other things which haven't really been talked about in this debate at all, but on questions of race, previously they have announced this Racial Equality Act, the Race Equality Act, probably would be better understood as a Race Equity Act, so far as, to the extent we know much about this proposed piece of legislation, it would kind of smuggle in that kind of DEI ideology, equality of outcome effectively on questions of race. You've also had Annalise Dodds, who's kind of become Labour's unofficial kind of wokester-in-chief, tweeting things like, we're going to improve kind of access to finances for BAME firms. This is the sort of thing which I think will really kind of fill the void. There'll be a lot of discussions about what has this government achieved. It will be on matters of the culture war, on matters of identity politics, that they will outsource this stuff to the genuine identitarians, and in which they'll try to carve out a legacy on. Other areas I'm sure we'll go into. Also, I think on questions of democracy, I think it's also something that people should be very careful of. Everything from their desire to kind of give more authority and bolster things like the OBR, various different parts of the blob. There's even been talk about they want to go back to a previous policy of the Tories, but one they want to double down on, of making the Bank of England much more kind of proactive on the climate front. What that exactly means, I'm not entirely sure, but that's going to be
I
interesting.
think we know what it means.
And also even things like votes for 16s. I mean, that's something which is presented as a kind of great democratic reform, but as we all know, it's just an attempt to generationally gerrymander and to try and lock in their own majority. So I think on those two clear things, the culture war and questions of democracy, they're obviously going to really be a huge distinction between them and the Tories, and something that people shouldn't take lightly, I think.
Quite reminiscent, actually, of the Democrats and Republicans 2020. We were looking ahead to the 2024 election, but actually, again, a lot of people thought, well, Joe Biden, he's the grown-up in the room. He's not in for all of this madness.
He's reasonable, he's centrist.
Within 2 hours of getting in the Oval Office, he signed in a load of trans rights and things like that. Again, trans rights, as in trampling on women's rights. And it is extraordinary. But I disagree with you quite a lot, actually, in terms of, the culture war is a dividing line. But on paper, and in terms of what they say in their sound bites, what have the Tories actually done? 14 years in power. This didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen like last month. And oh, goodness me, we haven't got time to legislate. This has been going on for a very long time. And people like me and you guys have been shouting from the rooftops about this. And they've done nothing. It's only when there's a prospect of an election coming up, oh, well, now we're going to do this. I don't need people to tell me what a woman is unless they are a complete idiot and think that we've got penises. Still can't find mine. So he gets to find a girlfriend, he's got one. But I do need people who you can't just talk the talk, you need to walk the walk. So weirdly, when it comes to net zero, oh, what's a 5-year difference before they wreck the economy with their insanity? Trans, oh, well, you say you know what a woman is, but you're not actually going to do anything to protect her. You're going to have a consultation on some guidance for schools. Frankly, It's all just absolute nonsense because neither of these two major parties are actually acting to do anything about these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we certainly shouldn't give the Tories any credit or have anything positive to say about them.
No, my audience don't.
But, but I suppose, is there a difference between, say, I don't know, we're stumbling into this stuff under the Tories, or it's happening slowly, whereas Labour will want to actively accelerate a lot of these changes.
I almost think it's worse, actually, because you have a load of people who go, I mean, Kemi Badenoch has been amazing on this, but you've got a load of people like Penny Mordaunt and others, trans women or women, said twice in the chamber while she was in a cabinet minister. And she, I don't think they actually, she just doesn't believe any of that, but then they don't take any action. They stop action to stop things like Tavistock, ruining children's lives and bodies forever. I think at least in their defence, a lot of the Labour people actually believe this insane stuff. And I give a little bit of an out for them being clinically insane. I mean, I don't trust them, and I don't think they are fit for public office. If you genuinely think, and I had a Labour councillor on my show this week, and he absolutely clarified, he genuinely believed that if a man, I think I rather cruelly used Tom Slater as the example, so 6'4" bloke, everything intact, no hormones, no nothing. He says, I'm going to live as a woman. I'm now a woman. 2 years later, under Labour laws, he will be allowed with no medical treatment, no nothing. One doctor signs off. He's then allowed to have a lie on his birth certificate and his passport and his driving licence saying that he is a woman. This guy said, yes, he would be a woman. He said an adult human female. He actually, I think, meant it, which is bloody terrifying.
It's nice to know I can go into a women's prison.
It is good to know.
I'm not saying I want to, but it's good to have the option. But no, that was interesting. And I think it was also interesting just seeing how Keir Starmer still stutters on these questions. The only formulation on the whole what is a woman question he's been able to say confidently is I agree with Tony Blair.
But he won't say what Tony Blair said.
Exactly. It's this bizarre loyally.
Tony Blair, again, he obfuscated. It was that whole sort of obvious that women have vagina and men have a penis. Oh, thanks for the age 6 biology lesson, mister.
Great insight.
But then it's always like, but trans people need respect. Yeah. No one's denying that. When trans rights and women's rights collide, which side do you pick?
Yeah.
If you're not going to move on to that, you ain't really addressing the issue.
No,
yeah,
absolutely.
I think that's an important point to pick up on because, we're trying to have discussions and debates about the law or how institutions should function. Whether showing respect to trans people, you would think is a sort of given. You respect all people, treat them with dignity and respect. That's not where the debate is. And the fact that likes of Tony Blair and Keir Starmer keep trying to pull out this straw man is, I think, quite worrying.
Yeah, and it's a deflection from actually dealing with the substance of the issue.
Just be kind. Well, let's be kind to women who don't want to bump into a bloke in the changing rooms. That's being kind.
And it's telling that Starmer has never condemned any of the trans activists who have, for instance, sent death threats or anything like that to Rosie Duffield, but he will talk about the toxicity of the gender critical.
Yeah, brought up Brianna Jai again the other week.
Yeah.
All of this, I think, is really cynical. And it also sort of related to this, but on a slightly different issue. I think the other thing that people need to be very conscious of is questions of freedom of speech and incoming Labour government. I mean, again, it's very vague, but we've already seen Keir Starmer at the Pink News Awards a few years ago talking about making transphobia hate crime and bolstering hate crime legislation in that direction, which, as we all know, hate crime has just become a euphemism for hate speech, really, and for clamping down on what people have said.
Saying something someone doesn't like.
Exactly, misgendering and so on. I mean, there's already been people who have been caught out by online hate speech laws for alleged transphobia, and this is even before a Labour government comes in and
hundreds of
starts
people have
messing
had
with the
their
setup.
accounts taken down on X, formerly known as Twitter. And again, I'm thinking, well, why has mine not been taken down? Because I've said the same things. But it's interesting, isn't it, that Keir Starmer says he would meet J.K. Rowling. Oh, that's very nice of him. I mean, J.K. Rowling should only turn up with Rosie Duffield in tow, who he has refused to meet.
Although he claims he's met her, even though he hasn't. Again,
Might have come across her in the canteen or something, I suppose.
There's that sort of slipperiness.
But again, this shouldn't be something that's difficult. I mean, I've always felt that when people say, "Oh, well, the women, that trans thing," culture wars, boring. It's not. Can I feed my kids? Can I pay my rent or my mortgage? Can I afford to put petrol or diesel or whatever else you do in the car? And get to work. It's not the bread and butter stuff, and yet it is a big indicator of how willing people are to lie to us, and to pander to extremist, mad ideologies. And, if you're taking the knee to Black Lives Matter, and if you are, and by the way, there are plenty of Labour people who are horrified by this as well, by the way. And if you are saying that you think that a small percentage of women do have penises, and you really genuinely think there isn't an issue with a man being put in a woman's prison as a prisoner, then I think you are so unfit for public office, it doesn't even bear thinking about.
So we should talk a little bit about some of the constitutional plans Labour has. Votes at 16 is a clear example. A change in the law that no one particularly wants. 16-year-olds certainly aren't asking for it, but it seems as if just because they are more likely to vote Labour. Brexit as well, another issue where Keir Starmer has flip-flopped all over the place. He has this sort of vague formulation that we'll get closer to the EU but not rejoin anything. He was even talking about signing a kind of migration pact with the EU at one point, which would have actually, tied us into the EU in some ways closer than we were before. We never had a sort of returns agreement of the kind he's thinking about with the EU. So again, these sort of questions, remain. There are sort of real worries about a Starmer government.
And there's going to be, especially on the Brexit issue, there's going to be incredible pressure on him, because I'm sure everyone has noticed this, that whilst rhetorically, whether it's Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves, any given opportunity to say, we accept Brexit, we're not going back into the single market, we're not going back into the customs union, they will take that. They recognise that obviously that's what lost the last election for them in a lot of constituencies, the combination of that and Corbyn, certainly. And yet the people who are most enthusiastic about an incoming Starmer government, this Starmer landslide, which we're bizarrely facing, are the unreconstructed Ramona set. It's the people who have been screeching from the hilltops that every problem we face is a result of a bit more friction at the border in terms of goods, and the white hot intense passion that we must re-enter the European Union.
The outrage at queuing to passport control in France. I mean, I never not queued at passport control in France.
Exactly. An extra 10 minutes before you go on your holiday in Verbier, whatever it is. Like, this sort of stuff is really important for his kind of, if not his main social base, and certainly his media cheerleaders. There's going to be intense pressure on him to do something. And I think just because Keir Starmer says he doesn't want to do that, as we all know, that doesn't mean he's not going to go ahead and do it.
He spent 3.5 years just desperately trying to undermine that referendum. And you notice the tone in which he says that, even in the debate this week, head to head with Rishi Sunak, his tone is sort of, we are not going to go into return to the EU. But he said it's done with a sort of a wry, look, I know that you know that you know that I know that I want to. I'm saying this with regret, but that's what I have to say. But I love the fact that he's going to do these amazing deals. And this comes back to everything, by the way, because this is whether it's the doctor strike or dealing with channel migrants or trade deals or whatever it is. If only he could just sit in a room with these people. Apparently, Keir Starmer has this almost magical ability. I mean, he's the Jesus Christ of British politics, his ability to persuade people to come to his side. And suddenly, Macron's going to go, oh, well, of course, I would take some more back, not a problem. The doctors will go, yes, we'll back down, we'll take whatever it is that we've been offered. Yeah, he's living in clown cuckoo land.
Yeah, I don't think he's ever persuaded anyone of anything. No. He normally adopts their position, is kind of how he gets around.
You can't even persuade Mrs. Starmer to go out on the campaign trail.
This episode of the Spiked podcast is brought to you by Shopify. At Spiked, we know that many of you would love to start your own business, but while breaking from your 9-to-5 will give you tons of freedom, it's also full of unexpected challenges. Luckily for you, there's a way to make the whole process that much easier. And it sounds like this. Yes, that's the sound of another sale on Shopify. Shopify is the groundbreaking all-in-one commerce platform that helps you become your own boss. Shopify supports up-and-coming business owners like you all over the world. Whether you trade in wooden spoons or giant balloons, Shopify can simplify how you sell your goods, both online and in person. Your big, bold ideas can become a reality. Shopify brings your entire operation under one easy-to-use online dashboard, helping you manage goods, take payments, and connect with your customers. Shopify also launches your business on those all-important social media marketplaces, from Facebook to YouTube to TikTok. Wherever your customers are, Shopify will help you reach them. And don't worry about losing your freedom either. Shopify's extensive tools can help you constantly refine and tweak your image, so you'll always be one step ahead of the competition. Whether your goals are big or small, Shopify will help your business thrive. So, if you're ready to become your own boss, get Shopify today. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/spiked. Go to shopify.co.uk/spiked shopify.co.uk/spiked to take your business to the next level. That's shopify.co.uk/spiked. Let's talk a little bit about the Green Party, a kind of under-scrutinised party.
No one's ever said that before.
Well, it's one of those parties where people just think of them as they're sort of just nice, aren't they? Or, just sort of left wing. So we're going to take them to task today. Carla Denyer, the co-leader, was in the news this week because it turns out that she does not own a heat pump. Now, if people don't know, heat pumps are the big thing that you need to have. You're supposed to rip out your gas boiler if you care about the planet.
Yeah.
In fact, the government gives you quite a lot of subsidies to do this. In a way, you can't blame them because they're so ridiculously expensive. But it is at the core of her
I loved her.
campaign.
You can definitely blame her.
You could definitely blame her.
But I loved her excuse. It was in one of these ITV leadership interviews, and she said, "I literally have quotes in my inbox." But then Rishi Sunak called the election, and it had to go on, which is very convenient because that would maybe stack up if heat pumps had only hit the market this year, or there'd been a relatively fringe part of the whole decarbonisation process. But it's been front and centre for years now.
Yeah.
The government have been throwing thousands of pounds at people to try and get them to install them. And I think it's just a reminder that when you see so many cases of eco-hypocrisy, look at what they do rather than what they say. Look at how they live their own lives rather than how they say you should live your lives.
So and just stop oil people who then sort of go off on a ski holiday.
Or have free diesel cars, as is sometimes the case. They themselves are bristling against what they claim to want to impose on the rest of us because I think deep down they recognise this is a shit deal, what it is that they want us all to live like. So it was a revealing moment.
But it's all about them. It's the other, isn't it? The key thing about the Green Party is they're not cuddly. They're not nice. They are the most authoritarian. Now, I don't use this word lightly. I really don't. But I mean this. Fascistic party that we have. It is extraordinary, the free ride they get. And they only get that free ride because, they're never going to get in. Well, of course, they get in every single time because we've got a Conservative government being replaced by a Labour government, both of which are fully signed up to net zero. So if you think, the Green Party ain't having influence, well, think again because we get them. But I mean, they are even madder than those two main parties on this, on net zero issues and climate change issues. But, banning people from, short haul flights where you could get the train. Just things like, basically penalise anyone who gets lots of flights. So I'm not happy about that. I love my holidays. But also the heat pump thing, again, you've got a technology that doesn't work very well. It costs a fortune. It doesn't actually heat your home properly. Yeah. But this is the answer to everything. The idea that the great British public, who've only, by the way, had central heating in their homes. My husband grew up in a home without central heating, without any proper heating. He says, I remember being cold. I remember being cold all winter. We've only had it for about sort of 60 years. People aren't going to give up their boilers and their heaters. I'm telling you, if there's one thing that will get me to grab a stake and go and, storm, Westminster, it's if you try and take away my thermostat. I feel the cold. I want my heater. But again, the hypocrisy of these people, they get on the planes, they do all the same things. They don't have heat pumps. They just live a complete and utter lie because the whole thing is fantasy. The whole thing is fiction. Net zero is fiction. It's never going to happen. It's not affordable. It's not desirable. It wouldn't save the planet even if we did. And you do wonder if they do know it deep down. But then it is a religious cult. Yeah. It's a virtue signaling religious cult. It's not actually about practical politics. And the only way they would ever achieve any of their policies would be by imposing them on a very unwilling public. The British public are never going to vote for the Green Party to be in power because they would look at the policies and go, I don't think so. Yeah. Or simply they start to get put in and people realise that, just how painful it is. Which is why all these bodies, by the way, want to bypass Parliament to have these citizens' assemblies, don't they? Yeah, exactly. Well, they're just lectured to by David Attenborough and then led to the right decision. There was a report by Deutsche Bank came out a few years ago and basically just said, the whole net zero thing is probably not compatible with democracy. There's no way that we could see people putting up with this stuff. We might need eco dictatorship. It suggested because it rips up the whole unwritten contract between the government and the governed, which is our aim is to make your life that bit more comfortable, that bit easier. You're the next generation better off than the one before it. The Greens are openly saying that there are some things you're going to have to go without. At least they're more honest than some of the other parties, and they're explicitly anti-growth as well, which is insane. But
that's why all of these policies, in terms of not just the technology of a lot of these green technologies, but also the politics of it is like trying to push water uphill. It's not going to work. It will collide either with kind of physical reality or electoral reality at some point, and only now we're starting to see that as well.
And that's
absolutely.
it. People simply won't put up with it. But again, they've been sold a lie. Oh, green jobs, we're going to invest, was it Labour, 28 billion, and it's 4.7 billion or whatever. Whatever. 4,000,000 billion. I don't care. You can just pluck numbers out of the sky. It's not going to happen. The technology doesn't exist right now. It's not going to make any difference. But there's not a proper debate about this. And you see this with BBC, ITV, Sky, getting all these, Channel 4, getting these debates. They don't actually debate these things properly. There's never any proper scrutiny on these issues because they're all signed up to it too.
Yeah, and do you remember in 2019 there was a climate debate on Channel 4, and the Tories and the Brexit Party were not there, but it was just the other party saying, "Well, we'll do this 5 years earlier." Well, that's this thing that's not going to happen.
That's it, isn't it? The Green Party, it's again everything on net zero in terms of the targets about boilers and cars and things. It's all basically going to do it in 2030, 2035, 2045, or 2050 or whatever.
Yeah.
These are all the differences. There's no difference in terms of are you actually going to do it, apart from Reform UK, who just want to scrap the whole thing altogether because it's insane. And on this, they're correct.
Yeah, that's true. And Tom, I mean, there's also, aside from this sort of environmentalism, extreme environmentalism being a sort of inherently crankish point of view, there are some real nut jobs as well, of a different kind cropping up in the Green Party, some nasty figures.
The lack of scrutiny on this particular issue I found fascinating, because there's obviously been a lot of comments about some cranks who've made their ways onto the Reform candidates list. But this was a story in the Times a couple of weeks ago now, where they unearthed at least 20 candidates on the Green Party's list.
Quite a lot.
Which is quite a lot, who have said some questionable to outrageous things about Israel, Hamas, Jewish people. I mean, everyone's kind of familiar with Mothin Ali, the Green councillor who chanted Allahu Akbar at his count, which everyone tried to pretend wasn't a big deal. But then they found out, he'd led a harassment campaign against a local rabbi and so on and so forth. But some of these examples, which I'm actually going to read out some of them so I don't forget some of the details. But one candidate, Adam Pugh, Deptford and Lewisham North, on the day of October 7th said, "There is no peace without freedom, resist." You've got a guy called Kafense Dennis, who's the candidate for Birmingham Perry Bar. He praised a pro-Palestine demonstration at Auschwitz on Holocaust Memorial Day, saying never again means never again. He's still a candidate, by the way. Some of these other people have been. The list goes out. Simon Anthony Barking compared Hamas to the Home Guard and the French Resistance. Natalie Anderson at Woking wondered out loud if the 7th of October was orchestrated, presumably by Israel. Chris Brodie, Chingford and Woodford Green, now actually suspended, shared an article claiming the worst atrocity, October 7th, was actually probably a false flag engineered to do a genocide in Gaza.
This is basically Twitter conspiracy theory.
It's incredible. I mean, this is apparently the mix at this election. It's heat pumps and Hamas apologism.
And am I right in thinking that the man who praised the Auschwitz protest is also their diversity officer?
He's their equality and diversity director, and remains in that role as well as being a candidate for Birmingham Perry Bar. It's crazy.
Diversity, certainly.
Yeah, we like a diversity of views, but not that bloody.
My thing is when people say it was terrible someone said that. No, it's terrible that people think it. It's good that they've said it. You always want to know what people actually think.
Yeah, if you're prepared to praise a protest at Auschwitz on Holocaust Memorial Day, something has gone wrong in your wiring.
I mean, we thought Rishi Sunak was making bad decision by leaving D-Day commemorations early.
Yeah.
There's bad judgment and there's bad judgment, isn't there? It defies belief, and yet it's completely believable. I'm astonished by how many people on, again, the left, the extreme left and rights, again, they're actually, it's a circle, isn't it? It's not a line, and they join up. I mean, it's just amazing. But again, it's how little scrutiny those on the left, because officially they're nice people, get for their abhorrent views, and how little people on compared to how much people on the right get.
So finally, let's talk about David Tennant and his rant about Kemi Badenoch. Let's take a look at the clip.
Until we wake up and Kemi Badenoch doesn't exist anymore. I don't wish ill of her, I just wish her to shut up.
Julia, what the hell do you make of that?
I don't know where to start. Can I start from the fact that I do have skin in this game? I just can't bear David Tennant. If I knew nothing about David Tennant's views on anything, I just don't like him as an actor. He's just one of these people, if he's in it, I go, I don't want to see it. I just don't. Okay. So I'll start from that. And Doctor Who, yawn. Anyway, I'm not an 8-year-old boy. So, although I could identify as one if I so choose and be taken seriously. What he said at this LGBTQ plus awards last Friday, what's extraordinary about it to me is that he says this in front of hundreds of people at this awards ceremony, whoops, cheers, isn't he wonderful, what a great guy, and nothing comes out for days because everyone in that room is totally signed up. What he said was perfectly acceptable. To say that you think that a woman whose actual job it is as Women's and Equalities Minister, as well as, of course, being in the cabinet, to actually protect women's equal rights and other people's equal rights, it's actually that she should be, he wished, not existing or to shut up, is extraordinary. And the other thing about this is, I love Kemi Badenoch's, I will not shut up, basically, 2 fingers up to him. But what I find really, really extraordinary is the double standards on the left and the right. Again, I know I keep banging on about it, but it is extraordinary. Imagine any actor or any political figure, anyone at all, who was a white, straight man, who spoke about a black or Asian shadow cabinet member in exactly the same terms, they would be out of public life. They would probably lose their job. They would be, that's it, the end for them. No, but it's okay because it's David Tennant, because he's got the right views. Kemi, however, has the wrong views, doesn't she? Even though she ticks a lot of boxes on our intersectional Olympics, victimhood rally, she ticks a lot of boxes, but she doesn't tick quite the right ones.
Well, you lose that protection, don't you? If you're, you see this a lot with sort of ethnic minority conservative politicians. Suddenly they're
called coconuts.
They're called
other
coconuts.
racist
It's not even just that. Actually, in fact, it's worse than that. You're allowed to racially abuse. It's absolutely obscene,
and it is telling, isn't it, in this particular instance, where it's another reminder that gender ideology has basically become an excuse for men to tell women to shut up about defending their rights. It's incredible. I was also struck in the back and forth between Kemi Badenoch and Tennant just about how, in this debate in general, the kind of disparity in seriousness, in actually knowing anything about the issue, in brain cells often, to be perfectly frank, where you just have some kind of know-nothing virtue signalling celebrities or campaigners who have never really thought much about this issue at all. They've just intuited that this is the high-status opinion. They've been told that this is the new civil rights movement. That's where they come, and that's basically what we said on stage, wasn't it? I just thought this was common sense. And they've
shouldn't
got that.
be given an award because everyone should be thinking the same thing.
Thanks.
But I am wonderful. And then on the other side, people who for years have been reading about this, thinking about this, wrapping their heads around it, and doing so quite cautiously in some instances and slowly because they knew that they were treading on a landmine potentially. Absolutely. And so that's one of these things where it's always, I'm always struck by the fact that whenever you have one of these spats break out, or whenever one of these campaigners is forced to account for themselves, to actually debate these issues, brought into an employment tribunal, as often happened, or whatever, it all just falls apart.
But have you seen the move to cancel David Tennant? Now, I don't want him cancelled. I don't want him to lose a single day of work or a single pound of income. I don't want him not to be shut up. And I've talked about this on my show actually with Helen Joyce, the fabulous, wonderful, amazing Helen Joyce from Sex Matters. And she said, no, we definitely don't want these people to be shut up. We want them to say it out loud.
Let them speak.
Let them speak, because also we've got the arguments and the facts on our sides. And as you say, they're spouting utter nonsense. People need to be treated with dignity. No one's not treating people with dignity. There is no God-given right that any man has to put on a wig and be treated with dignity in a woman's toilet. You won't be treated with dignity in a woman's toilet that I'm in. I'll tell you that for starters. I'll ask you to get the F out, because that's not where you belong. And I don't go in the men's toilet. Well, unless there's a very big queue. But that's a different dynamic, as we know. But this is the thing. It is extraordinary how little sort of payback there is when we know that the men in the showbiz world who have spoken out to protect women and children on this issue, the Graham Linehans and the James Dreyfuses and others, J.K. Rowling, they can't cancel J.K., she's too big, but the vitriol she gets is astonishing. Nothing for David Tennant. When he's got skin in the game, as he says, because he says he has a non-binary child. Of course, he doesn't, because there's no such thing. So he may as well say to me that that he's got a unicorn. He hasn't got a unicorn either. They don't exist either. He has a son who he's lying to. by telling him that, yes, he may well be two different genders at the same time, which is not a thing.
Yeah.
And I find that appalling. But these are always the most, I think, dangerous people in this, because the parents of sadly mixed up, confused children who are being lied to by their family members, and probably schools and others as well, and everyone on YouTube, they've got so much skin in the game, they can never, ever allow for the fact they might be wrong.
And the idea that David Tennant or any of these people have the moral high ground in all of this stuff, we should refuse to allow them that territory, particularly after everything that's happened and everything we know. I would love to see him...
Tavistock especially.
Exactly. Yeah. I would love to see him give that speech again, just kind of basking in almost real life retweets, as it were, in front of a group of detransitioners who have been chewed up and spat out by the NHS as a consequence of this insane policy in gender clinics. I'd love to see him say that in front of the women who have been sexually assaulted in prison by men in England. It's happened in England as well, the Karen White case, just because people like him wanted to mouth a slogan and feel good about himself. This is the idea that this is A, any kind of civil rights struggle, or B, morally virtuous in any sense of the word, is obviously not true by this point. But still, there's credence in it, isn't there?
How long do you think they'll hold on to it? Because there is an element where so often these things kind of crumble. And again, remember reading in Brendan's book, the chapter about trans ideology, but also echoes of what happened, witchfinder generals and things, and how it is extraordinary how it sort of it went on for ages. Then suddenly, basically someone said the emperor's got no clothes on and there are no witches.
The spell breaks.
And the spell breaks. Yeah. And I think a lot of us thought with the Caste Review, that spell was broken. It gave an out for a lot of the people who were trying to be in and right on. Clearly not. I mean, I think most people think that things are going to get a lot worse now with Labour getting in than, as we were discussing earlier, than getting better. So how will that spell be broken?
I think, well, I hope it breaks. I think no one's going to admit they were wrong. That's probably the thing we have to.
They'll say
we have to get over that in
change.
Exactly, we have to get over that in advance. We're not going to expect any praise or thanks. But I think that in general, in so many ways, the common sense or the sort of mass of people is on the side of
and also the level of anger is rising now.
That's true, yeah.
Again, it's the same as actually if you go back to Brexit and immigration as well. It's only so many times you can shout bigger at someone for having a legitimate concern about your country changing massively as a result of mass uncontrolled immigration.
Yeah.
There's only so many times people will put up with it before they'll say, yeah, that's not going to work for me anymore.
And I think if David Tennant had made that speech 4 or 5 years ago, would it have flown under the radar? Would have just thought, another celebrity mouthing off? The reaction, has been quite rightly pretty strong.
There's a backlash now, and it has a certain consequence, has a certain form. There is a debate about these issues in a way that there was zero debate about it even 4 or 5 years ago.
It's being discussed in the general election.
Exactly. And I think we're just at a certain point where, because of the complete collapse of the Tory party and the fact that Labour are riding to a completely unearned landslide majority,
which even they know is unearned.
Exactly. That unfortunately these ideas are still kind of, at least in terms of the top level of politics, still hanging around kind of in the ascendancy. But it won't take long for, I think, the common sense of the populace to reassert itself, because as soon as there's another one of these controversies, I think people are not going to put up with it.
Thank you so much for watching the Spikes podcast. We'll be back next Friday. If you hit subscribe and click the bell, you'll never miss an episode. And in the meantime, why not check out all of Spike's other videos and podcasts on this channel? And for more Spiked content, find us at spiked-online.com.